What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the One and Go Talk podcast. I'm joined by who some may consider their favorite person on this podcast, Jimmy Watkins. Jimmy, how you doing? How is your week going? I know you've been busy. Browns coverage, everything coming up very quickly. What's on your mind? What's going on?
Favorite of some. Did not know that my parents wrote into the subtext, but I do appreciate both of their support.
Man, sometimes you need a little love from mama and papa, especially since it was mom's birthday the other day. That's what you get when you give the shout outs, Jimmy. You know how it rolls. But I definitely have seen on subtext like previously too that people just love your analysis, love your columns, and be able to get your thoughts and feelings on not only the Cavs but the Browns as well. So it's good to have you back on, buddy. I hope you're having a good week. But today we are going to talk about the Cavs' schedule, right? It came out before I went on vacation. We haven't really gotten to go into it in depth, but we've talked about some rankings and some people that have said where they think the Cavs may fall based on the schedule, based on the Eastern Conference, Western Conference, how strong those are. You hit up our guys on subtext. Talking about the Eastern Conference and how DraftKings has them set up. They have them ranked 5th in the Eastern Conference with Boston at 58.5 wins, Knicks 52.5 wins, 76ers 51.5 wins, Bucks with 50.5 wins, and the Cavs with 48.5 wins. Then you have in the 6th, 7th, and 8th seed, it's the Magic 47.5 wins, Pacers with 46.5 wins, and the Heat with 44.5 wins. So, obviously, that's kind of the same bar that's been set for the Cavs, right? Because they had 48 wins last year. Whether or not that is going to be an improvement this season is going to be dependent not only on how they start, but also the schedule and how things round out. So, before we get into this one, I want to get your perspective on the regular season schedule for the Cavs, how you think it shapes up, and if you picture or like circled a game on your calendar that you're most excited for.
I think we're starting off pretty hot, honestly. We go opening night, JB and the Pistons, right? And that's going to be an emotion, that's going to be, I mean, everyone's always ready to go coming out of the gate, right? But that's going to be an emotional game. Like, JB is going to have those guys ready to play. I mean, the Pistons have a lot to prove in general, but he's pretty good at getting young guys to buy in. And again, as we talked about on the podcast, it is reasonable for JB Bickerstaff to feel like he got an unfair shake from the Cavs. I don't feel that way. I think we all understand why the Cavs felt like they needed to move on from JB, but particularly if I'm trying to drum up a little bulletin board material, I might play that up a little bit if I'm JB. I might give an impassioned pregame speech about how the Cavs cast him aside, and I don't know, the media is casting the Pistons aside. I did not look at the Pistons over-unders on DraftKings because this is not relevant right now. Like they're still trying to climb their way out of the basement. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. And then I think it's 2 nights later, LeBron and the Lakers come to town. Like, it's always an event when LeBron comes back to Cleveland, and especially as we get closer to the end of his career, and I really do think we are inching up against it. As I think this is year 23 for him. That's we gotta treasure every glimpse we get of that guy in formerly the Q, now Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. So I think we're starting off how the NBA is doing that intentionally. Beyond that, I could not tell you when they play Orlando for the first time, but that's always interesting to me. The Knicks, interesting to me. Anytime they play, one of these established top 4, 5 kind of Eastern Conference contenders, Philly, Boston, Milwaukee, always worth watching. Always worth watching.
Yeah, and I think those are good ones. Obviously, the start of the season is in Toronto. They go out to Drake's little fandom, little spotlight out there, and start the season out there. But the home opener against Detroit, I think that is, like you said, Jimmy, going to be a spotlight game. And it's starting off really well. And then I kind of go all the way to December, where you kind of got this slew of games at the beginning of the month and even to the middle of the month, where it's really slick competition, right? You start the month at home against the Boston Celtics. Then you go to December 8th in Miami. And then December 20th, they play against the Milwaukee Bucks. And on a back-to-back, they play against the Philadelphia 76ers. And then 2 days later, they play against the Utah Jazz, right? And I don't know how often, if at all, Donovan's been able to play. I know last season was rough for him against the Utah Jazz because he was either injured or sick throughout those different accompaniments and when they were playing. And it was like, all right, Donovan, are you ducking your own team, even though they're not really on the spectrum, right? So for me, I wasn't really looking at a specific game, but I was looking at like stretches because we all know, we remember when the Cavs went on a good hot stretch last season when Darius Garland and Evan Mobley were out. This year, I'm looking at where they might struggle and if there's room for them to improve throughout as well. But we remember like March and April were really rough Western Conference schedules, but that kind of gets a little bit earlier for this year for the Cavs. I'm talking about when they go to, obviously, they're playing against the Indiana Pacers twice in kind of like a baseball series with home and then away, January 12th and January 14th. Then they travel to OKC January 16th, and then they're in Minnesota on the 18th, and then they come back to Cleveland to play the Phoenix Suns on January 20th. So that's like a tough little stretch, especially when we talk about this DraftKings standing where you have guys like the Indiana Pacers who are in the 7th seed ranked wise with 46 and a half wins. And that was one of the things that you had asked the subtexters, Jimmy, which was which team projected above the Cavs seems most beatable and which team behind the Cavs scares you the most. So, Jimmy, I wanted to get your thought on this, but for me, I think it's really quick, right? I think it's the Bucks because we've seen that either Giannis and Dame haven't gotten meshed together yet, or Jared Allen's been able to stifle Giannis Antetokounmpo at the rim, and obviously you have Isaac Okoro currently or potentially, because he still hasn't signed the qualifying offer, being able to guard Damian Lillard. And we know how bad that matchup was for Dame last year. My goodness. So I would say the Bucks would be the easiest team. And then for me, the team that scares me is the team that, or it doesn't scare me, but the team that I think the Cavs would be most wary of is the team right behind them, the Orlando Magic, the 6th seed in this ranking poll by DraftKings. I think it's just they added a defensive presence in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, already on a defensive-minded team. Then you also have Paolo Banchero coming into the scene, and you think he's going to make another jump, trying to become one of the faces of the league. And you're not to mention you still have Franz Wagner on this team. Plus, you got guys that just the Mo Wagner that just gets under the skin of the entire Cavs organization and fandom. So, Jimmy, I'm going with the Bucks would be the best suitable matchup right now for the teams that are above the Cavs. And then I also have the Orlando Magic as a team that I think they would least like to see. Maybe we'll call it in a 7-game series at this point.
If we're talking, so I was when I sent the text, I was just thinking like regular season win totals. We can do both though. If we're talking regular season win totals, I think the Sixers and Bucks are both pretty attainable benchmarks for the Cavs to get to, because I mean those are old teams, like old and oft injured teams. Paul George, I believe, is like 34, 35, and Joel Embiid is in his late 20s, but like spiritually, that man's knees are like he's hurt. The Philadelphia 76ers' main objective in the 2024-25 regular season should be to get Joel Embiid and Paul George as close to 100% by the end of the regular season as possible. Whatever you have to sacrifice in terms of seeding, I don't care. Like they are, which is funny because you normally would just normally these kind of rest teams are the teams that have established themselves and done it before, made deeper playoff runs, even won titles, right? Teams like, people, Cavs and Warriors, for example, would lose even when their stars were playing like inexplicable games, just like due to lack of effort. I would encourage the Philadelphia 76ers, like Paul George, don't play defense on 10 every night. We need you to get there, buddy. We need you to get there. We all love watching Paul George play basketball. Dude is smooth as all get out. We want you there in May. We want to see what that team can really get to. Joel Embiid, I'm trying to think of the number of regular season games that Joel Embiid should play. That is like before we start getting crazy, like 60. Like if the 76ers go into this season saying we are structuring this season for Joel Embiid to play 60 games, 55. Like, I'm sorry about your All NBA awards and whatnot, but like we're trying to get a ring here. The Bucks are kind of in a similar situation. Damian Lillard, we're just trying to get you there. Chris Middleton in particular, he's been battling injuries the last couple of years. He's a sneaky important piece of that Milwaukee team. We're just trying to get you there. Giannis, you can't control. He's going to be playing like a two-way madman for probably 70-plus games. That's just how it works. But even him, he's been injured in the first round each of the last 2 years in the playoffs, and they've lost in the first round each of the last 2 years in the playoffs, wasting years of Giannis's prime. So I do think both of those teams are going to be a little bit smarter about the regular season. I think the Cavs, maybe the most puzzling number on that list is the Cavs sitting at 48.5. They won 48 games last year, and they lost Evan Mobley and Darius Garland for 6 weeks each, and they never really got Darius Garland back, as we've discussed. I understand that the league is better as a whole. There are going to be fewer, bottom feeding teams that you can beat up on. And as I said, like I do think Milwaukee and Philly are going to take their feet off the gas pedal of the regular season a little bit. I understand that the East is better, the league is better. I wrote my preseason column last year was that the Cavs get the 2 seed because I just think the regular season matters more to them than it does some of these other teams. And I still think that's true, man. Like I think playoff seeding matchups mean a lot to them. Like if you're Boston's probably still going to be the 1 seed because they're a death machine. But like if Philly, Milwaukee, I just advocated for both of them to actively suppress the regular season record. The Cavs can't be thinking that way. I mean, by all means, we need to get Donovan Mitchell to the playoffs as healthy as he possibly can. And the same goes for the other 3, although they're younger guys, so it's load management not as big of a question there. I think they were just riding Donovan pretty hard at times during that big winning streak they went on last season. Like the Cavs should be gunning it. The Cavs should be going for a 2 seed next year because you want to sidestep any possibility of seeing Orlando. I think Orlando's going to be much improved. They will definitely be the team you don't want to see. The team that could catch the Cavs. I think Orlando could catch the Cavs. Orlando's in the same boat as the Cavs. I think they could catch teams like Philly and Milwaukee too if those teams aren't careful because the KCP addition cannot be overstated. It's not just deep. He's a shooter, man. I think his shooting percentage has been a little bit inflated by playing with the best passer on planet Earth, Nikola Jokic, the last couple of years. Even before that, when he was playing with LeBron, he shot like 41% during their championship year. His career numbers are closer to mid to high 30s. But still, the Magic are looking for like shooting competency out there. And the KCP's getting up high volume attempts, and he's a great shooter. That's a huge addition for them. Their defense is going to be very good once again, and they're a young team. They're going to be hungry. So I think I just answered both those questions at once. But I do think that like the Cavs have legit 55 win potential this year if they can stay healthy enough and they go for the regular season the way I think that they should, because they are as incentivized to get a high seed and try to avoid some of these get home court in the playoffs and then try to avoid some of these other big stone throwing teams in the East. I think you show me your incentive, I'll show you. I don't know what that expression is. Show me your incentive, I'll show you the result, or I'll show you your something. Someone in subtext knows what I'm saying right now. They're yelling it in their car. But show me the incentive, I'll show you something. The Cavs are motivated to win a lot of regular season games, so I think that's what they're going to do.
That is a bold statement before preseason, before we even seen the big three, really, of Philly, the Vandy boys of New York, the second seed in the Eastern Conference. Woo-wee! I'm not gonna say it's not possible,
They should be
but
going for it. They should be going
100%.
for it
I don't
in a
think
way that these other teams aren't.
right.
I
And
mean,
I don't.
the Knicks are. I don't know. I'd worry about Jalen Brunson falling apart just because of Tibbs. Like that. That team is gonna. I don't think that guy's ever gonna learn his lesson, and I worry about the Knicks. The Knicks are a great regular season team. They have a lot of injury-prone guys, and I don't know. They make me nervous. They make me nervous.
100%. They definitely do. I mean, talking about falling apart, Josh Hart should be the one to fall apart before Jalen Brunson. But Joel Embiid, I wanted to touch on that before we get back to the Cavs topic of them making it to the second seed in the East. And I mean, I had them probably fifth best, but what is possible with the injuries and stuff, I think is a good point. I mean, Joel Embiid hasn't played more than 65 games in a season more than twice in his entire NBA career.
It's so sad. He's such a great basketball player.
Right. And like there's been arguments about Joel Embiid being the best player in the NBA currently. He just doesn't play because he's hurt all the time, right? And if the conversation is him and Nikola Jokic, I've heard people talk about him being better, Joel Embiid being better or a better fit or whatever. But Nikola Jokic is always there. He's a tank. He's always there for his team, right?
But by the way, to your point about Josh Hart, I just feel like Josh Hart is going to be on like local New York City commercials, cutting promos the way like we have people cutting like mesothelioma commercials around here. Like, was your career shortened by a Tom Thibodeau regular season rotation? Call 1-800-JOSH or something like that. Like we're going to have that. We're going to have that. And he's going to be old Derrick Rose will have his arm around him. Luol Deng. Everyone's that's we need to raise awareness. Tibbs, you have a really fun team. Let's ease into it.
Maybe that's his plan. Finally, Tom Thibodeau might actually take some minutes away because you got to stagger minutes with OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson and all these other guys. And, I mean, Mitchell Robinson's going to be thrown in there somewhere too. Like,
I think you just named all 6 of the dudes that are going to play all the minutes for the next year.
they don't have a bench. That is their downfall. They like no disrespect.
It doesn't even matter. I don't care. Like the Knicks last year were one of the deepest teams in the league. It didn't matter. They were ravaged by injuries. That's what a weird coincidence that is.
I mean, Dante DiVincenzo as well. I don't want to leave him on that list, but I mean, if we're talking about regular season, going after it, I think the teams that are, I mean, Boston is at the top, right? Boston's at the top. And then New York, if New York plays how Tom Thibodeau wants it to be, they're going to try and win every single game because that's just how New York does. So best I think the Cavs could do would be the 3rd seed. Realistically, I would say 4th or 5th seed, right? And I've said that before on this podcast, but I like what you're talking about, Jimmy. I like how you're making me feel about this team, how you're making me feel about the want, the desire for guys to get to that next level. But that's the other thing, right, about this team that they also have made recognize they don't want to be a regular season team. So maybe Donovan Mitchell obviously was a portion of the reason that J.B. Bickerstaff is no longer a part of the Cavs organization, right? So maybe he has a conversation with Kenny Atkinson and goes, hey, man, that can't happen again this year. I got to play less so I can be at 100% the entire season, right? Because we know that Donovan Mitchell was like sick last year. He was injured last year. He came back from the All-Star break not feeling 100%, but he knew he had to be there for his team. There were times last year where Darius and Evan were out, and Donovan, at the end of the season last year, Donovan felt like he had to come back because they had to get a position that they wanted or whatever. He pushed himself to the absolute limit, and it hurt him in the playoffs. That cannot happen this next season if they want to get to where they want to be, right? So I think, yeah, you're right, Jimmy. They're going to want to go for it, but there's got to be some balance to that. There's got to be some merit to that, like deciding whether or not to go at this very moment and to go into the playoffs, make a deep run. I think it's very.
You know what else
It's
can't happen? You know what
what's
else
that?
can't happen if they're going to get to where they want to go? They can't play Boston in the second round. And if you're playing that 4-5, maybe Boston. I don't really see a world, like even with the championship malaise, disinterest. Boston is so good. I don't see a world where they don't get the 1 seed next season. So that 2-3 line is going to be so important for a lot of those teams to try and avoid, just kick the rock down the road. Like, let someone else try to knock Boston off. I know, like, the Cavs will tell you, we don't want to duck. We're not going to duck any smoke. We want it all. You don't want to see Boston in the second round. You just don't.
Well, you are preaching to the entire Cavs fandom based on what happened last season in the last game of the season, Jimmy. Because we've had this argument, we've had this discussion, whatever you want to call it, about what the Cavs did or did not do, wink, wink, at the end of last season about playing the Charlotte Hornets, saying before the game that they were going to rest and make sure that their guys were ready for the playoffs, and then noticing that they were playing the Charlotte Hornets and put in the second unit, and then everything falls apart, right? And you were trying to play the game of trying to get seeding. We're not going to run away from smoke. We're not going to duck nothing. We're like that. We don't run for anything, right? Just like Jimmy said, like Darius Garland quotably said, we don't duck smoke. Well, you might have ran into smoke, right? You might have ran into the fire, right? They don't never tell you to run into the fire unless you got a fire fit and you ready for the fire, right? The Cavs at that point in time, after going through a 7-game series with the Orlando Magic, were not ready for the Boston Celtics mentally, physically, and just overall psychologically, right? Not to mention, Jimmy, we're talking about the team that took Darius Garland out, maybe by accident, right? He ran into Kristaps Porzingis. Obviously, it helped a little bit that Kristaps wasn't playing in that series, but I don't know for you, but for me, like Darius Garland is driving to the lane every single time, going to the bucket, trying to get to the basket, and before each game, you go, Kristaps Porzingis might be returning to the Celtics this series. Blah blah blah. Blah. Something's going to trigger something. you go have that mindset. And we talked about that last season about how he was fading away from the basket after that injury. I mean, you broke your face, dude. I don't blame you, but you can't. This is like what the entire situation is whether or not the Cavs are going to be able to do what they need to in the beginning of the regular season, win the games that they're supposed to win, right? We're talking about football earlier, Jimmy. You got to win the games that you're supposed to win to be able to put yourself in the position to win the games that you're an underdog in. And a lot of people are counting out the Cavs this year because, one, they didn't make any changes in the Eastern Conference that changed a whole lot this offseason. And two, they have a couple of different issues that could arise, and we've talked about it at an abundance. Does Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell work? Does Evan Mobley and Jared Allen work together, right? And, Jimmy, where does Max Strus fall into all of this, right? Because we're talking about a guy that had the playoff experience and needs to be able to play that way. Do you think that Max Strus has a bounce back year from his lack of shooting that he did last season? And how do you feel like he's going to be able to impact this team going forward?
I mean, I feel like Max has always been more of a like high volume 3-point shooter than a high efficiency 3-point shooter. Even going back to like his college days at DePaul, I think he maxed out at like 36% or something. But on like 8 attempts per game, that's the value in Max Strus. You have to respect him because he's gonna sling that thing, and he when he gets going, he's a real capital S shooter. But the kind of waxes and wanes, or maxes and wanes, if you will. And I think that the Max Strus is, it'd be nice for Max Strus to shoot like he did during the Miami playoff run that got him paid all the time. But I guess that's just not the reality. The Cavs can cross their fingers for him getting hot at the right time in the postseason, but for the most part, Max Strus, as an offensive player, has kind of shown you what he's going to be. He's going to hover around the mid to highish 30s, going on a high percentage. That's good enough. The Cavs just need guys that can space the floor around Donovan and Darius, and Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, who invert that spacing. But yeah, I think Max is going to be just fine, particularly because he does all the other non-box scores. Like, I mean, he does on the box score. He was one of their best rebounders during the playoffs last year. I think he had a couple of 9 rebound games. That's huge. He's competitive as heck on defense, and the intangible stuff that he brings to a team that's trying to, just like the edge that he brings to him. Like when Max Strus loses a playoff game, you don't really want to talk to that guy. He really, like, compared to everybody hates losing, Max Strus is in a bad mood when he loses a playoff game. I think that's healthy for this team to be around, and I think that bounce back, I don't know, man. I think he was really good in a lot of ways for the Cavs last year. It'd been nice for him to make a few more threes, but that's who he is. A high volume guy. He's not a high efficiency guy.
Yeah, I mean, talking to a player after a game, after a loss, right? Like, you love the guys that, like, in theory, hate losing more than they enjoy winning, right? But then having to talk to those guys and get their perception of what went wrong, what went right, is a completely different conversation. Donovan Mitchell is another guy that hates losing more than anything, especially in a playoff game. But I wanted to get into this question from our subtexter about Max Strus. He said, "Hi, guys. Related to Max Strus, I have heard you guys and Chris talk about how Max had an off-shooting year last year from three-point land. He's a career 36.5% three-point shooter, but this seems driven by 1 year, 2021-2022, where he shot 41%, and he shot 35.1% last year, 35% the year before in the regular season from three-point land. It seems more like he is a mid-30s% shooter from three. What provides confidence there can be an improvement on the margins in shooting percentage from deep?" And Jimmy, I think what you touched on earlier is really important for this, right? Because it's less of efficiency and more so of volume, because Max Strus shot 6.8 attempts from three-point range this past season. That's his second highest. I mean, the only one that he shot more in was 2022-2023 with the Miami Heat, where he shot 7. And for this Cavs team, the only person that shot more or attempted more three-pointers per game was Donovan Mitchell, right, with 9. And Donovan shot 36.8% from three-point range last year. So I think it's important to also consider what he brings to the table when it comes to points per shot attempt and all those little things that we kind of sometimes forget about, because Max Strus was in the 81 percentile for points per shot attempt, which is like the 22nd in the NBA last year. And he had guys like Buddy Hield in front of him, Zach LaVine, right? Guys who were getting to the basket more so, and even Buddy Hield, who we know to be a great three-point shooter. For me, the upside is this was like one of the first times that Max was really a forward. He's been playing wing, shooting guard more so his entire career. I feel like Max is going to get more comfortable in this role, not only offensively but defensively, and that'll allow him to have less fatigue. Plus, we also know, like, when we talk to Max Strus after these games, he's like, sometimes I need to shoot more to get into a rhythm. Because we've seen Max Strus, if Max Strus gets hot in the first quarter, sometimes it's just that quarter, right? He could have 18 points in the first quarter, and then he doesn't get his attempts throughout the rest of the game because he's trying to do so many different things. I think if he's able to spread those out or even get the same amount of shots that he feel like he needs, because in those playoff series, he would talk about, like, people would bring up his percentages and how he felt and stuff like that. And he said, sometimes I didn't feel like I got enough attempts. I didn't get to shoot enough. And that comes from being a volume guy, right? Because when we talk about guys in the playoffs, in the postseason, only getting like 6 instead of their 7 or whatever, it can get fluky. And I watched a video the other day on Mike Miller from when he was with the Miami Heat, playing alongside LeBron James, D Wade, Chris Bosh, all of them, and how he had to literally go and do work on the side. Like he would have to go run on a treadmill for 5 minutes and then shoot baskets. Because sometimes that would be how long it would take for him to get an absolute shot, like a fully good look. And he would have to take it and knock it down because, like we talked about with guys like Isaac Okoro and Sam Merrill, their attempts are less so, and they're going to have more time in between each look because obviously you want Donovan, Darius, Evan Mobley taking more of those looks. That it's going to be harder. And Max Strus kind of falls into that category too. And if his efficiency goes down, it might be because he's not as in rhythm. So I think somebody like Mike Miller having that kind of mindset, maybe that kind of training could help him this next season. And I don't know if he's doing that per se, but I think that that could be helpful. And I liked watching that from Mike Miller the other day. But Jimmy, do you feel like this is like something we should be worried about with Max, or something that is just a regular thing and Cavs fans are just gonna have to get used to that 35%? Do you think he can tick up again like he did a couple years ago?
I mean, I guess that I guess I don't know. It's always possible for a guy to get hot, but like our our buddy from Subtext said, this is Max Strus has repeatedly showed us that he's closer to a mid to high 30s on high volume kind of shooter than he is a 40% 3-point shooter. Again, nothing wrong with that. He is a guy that defenses need to respect. He averaged career highs in points per game, rebounds per game, and assists per game last year for the Cavs. And to your point about, I mean, I could actually see the attempts going down a little bit because you look at the roster, guys who attempted, what's the cutoff here? Let's say 4 threes a game. We're gonna Max, Donovan, Darius, Sam Merrill, Karis LeVert, George Niang. So Donovan and Darius have the ball in their hands a lot. Those are not the kind of guys that you're setting up for catch and shoot threes. What we're looking for here are guys who can bend the defense in a way that opens lanes for Donovan and Darius. Karis LeVert shot 5 threes a game, shot 32.5% on him. Guys are going to guard him out there, but he has been an up and down shooter for stretches of his career. George Niang, we all know what happened in the playoffs. It didn't work out. You hope for a bounce back season for the minivan, but like it's kind of a you got to show it to me in the playoff situation with him. Sam Merrill, that's a wild card. I mean, I think Kenny Atkinson might be a little bit more open to playing a guy like Sam Merrill. He's a huge offensive weapon, and that would certainly open up opportunities for Darius and Donovan, but also can open up opportunities for Max, because when you have basically one guy who's spacing the floor, I mean, Donovan or Darius always have the ball. So in lineups where Donovan or Darius are the only one of that pairing on the floor, you're going to have sometimes Max and I don't know, there's going to be some George lineups out there, but there can be it's easy for a defense to orient itself to not help off of Max. It's easier to do that when there are not as many capital S shooters on the court. They can force ball handlers a different direction where they have more help, or toward a shooter where they are more willing to help off, right? So, I mean, we need for Max to get to shoot more threes, which I think, by the way, I would take if Max Strus shoots 35-ish% on 7.5 threes. I still think that's an improvement for him next year. It would be nice for Karis's jumper to shoot a little straighter next year. It'd be nice for George Niang, who, by the way, had a very nice regular season last year. That would be nice. It'd be nice to see Sam Merrill to get some more run as well. Give defenses more, like have them scrambling around more, make the defenders think more about guys besides Max. That would also help. And Kenny Atkinson will be drawing stuff up to get Max on the move more as well. But I think Max Strus is fine, man.
With the Sam Merrill situation, I think it's interesting because you talk about a guy that had kind of a come to the NBA after being in the league for a couple of years moment, right? Because he was really coming to fire, and he was a guy that people didn't really have on their scouting reports, and now it's like, oh, you got to watch out for that guy because he's a sniper. And I mean, he shot 40% from three last year. I think it's going to be an interesting scenario when it comes to Sam Merrill because one, yes, Kenny Atkinson, like you said, Sam Merrill actually was on a recent podcast that I was listening to, and he talked about being excited for this new group, working with Kenny Atkinson with some time in Las Vegas during Summer League, all that different stuff. And they haven't got into like sets or anything, but he said that he was excited about the new staff, excited about the team that they have. And I think it's going to be interesting for Sam because there's two sides to the coin. More teams know about him now, and they're going to be more wary of his abilities from beyond the arc, and they're going to like always have eyes on him and stuff like that. But he's also going to be in a more offensive-minded system that's going to allow for him to have more sets ran for him and off the ball sprees and things like that. And we also know how much Sam was already moving, trying to mimic his game a little bit after Stephen Curry to create separation, create offense for him and himself, but also how much that helps his teammates because you have to keep eyes on him when he's on the floor. I think it's going to be really weird just to see what is ran because it's going to be so different from what we saw last year with a defensive-minded coach. But, Jimmy, I think when it comes to this team, this roster, and what we have with the makeup, and talking about guys that have the ball in their hands a lot more, another subtexter asked is would it be outrageous to think Mobley could score 20 to 22 points per game and 10 rebounds again this coming year? I'm really thinking he will take the jump with the high tempo and offensive minded coach, speaking of Kenny Atkinson, of course. And this is from our guy, Brandon from Charlotte, who's actually currently in Erie, PA, which is right around the corner from us. But, Jimmy, I mean, 20 and 10 for Evan Mobley this year, if he increases the 3-point mound, or I know you don't like that much as much, or even Chris doesn't like that as much. If Evan Mobley is able to just create his own shot, put the ball on the ground and attack defenders. And it's funny because we talk about watching these videos that are put online and all these things all the time. But like, even when you're talking about the competition level, it can be high. We've talked about him doing runs with Kevin Durant, with Chet Holmgren, all these different stars around the league. But sometimes you just get more comfortable in these open runs because you're not running sets. You're not offensively trying to do things to create all those spaces. And sometimes you're just testing your game, growing your bag, as the kids say. But Jimmy, do you think that this is a season that Evan Mobley can grow in? Do you think that this is the year that we see Evan Mobley take that jump as he's added a little bit more to his bag, added a little bit more confidence to his three-point shot? Presumably this offseason and from last year.
I got two thoughts here. First, real quick on Sam Merrill. That's a guy who needs to be watching your Mike Miller video, because he's the guy that jumps out to me from the playoffs last year, who was learning just how hard it is to be a specialist. I mean, when Sam Merrill plays in the G League, they don't bench him when he misses 3 shots. When Sam Merrill was playing at Utah State, they were like, this is a focal point. Our job on offense is to set as many screens for Sam Merrill and then throw him the ball. Okay. So that's a connection that I made in my head. To the Evan Mobley point, it's possible. I mean, again, show me the incentive. If Kenny Atkinson wants to make that a goal, and an emphasis is Evan push more after rebounds, which again, JB had that emphasis too. Evan beat guys down. Jared Allen is one of the fastest big men in the league. Jared Allen probably gets 4 to 6 points a game just by sprinting after he throws an outlet pass or after someone else gets a rebound. Push that down, Evans. Push that into Evans' head as well. If you want to, again, JB was doing this, but throw him the ball more at the elbow, let him create. Throw him in the mid post, let him work out. These are not new ideas, but again, if you wanted to make that an emphasis, I think it's possible. we literally just saw him average 21-9 in the second round of the playoffs against Boston. Now, of course, Jared Allen wasn't playing in that series. But yeah, I know that potential is in there because I saw it at the highest level. So I wouldn't say it's out of the question. I don't necessarily think the Cavs are going to prioritize it that way. Particularly if they're doing the regular season sprint that I would recommend, because I don't know that facilitating Evan Mobley's growth is a valid use of the regular season. Facilitating Evan Mobley's offensive growth may not maximize your win total. Does that make sense? Like, I think that you have to be careful here with the Cavs as you try to both experiment and see what else these young guys can give you and work Darius back, like get Darius feeling comfortable again and get Evan Mobley some more touches. And don't forget about Jared Allen. Jared Allen averaged a career high in assists last year. Make him feel involved in the offense too. And then, of course, Donovan Mitchell is, the best player, maybe the second best player in franchise history, depending on how you feel about Kyrie. But that kind of there's a rub there between maximizing Evan's development and getting the highest postseason seed possible. I think more established teams frankly, that I have more confidence in 7-game series, I would choose the Evan route. And you still have, I think you can still make a case that it's more important for the Cavs to get as much Evan Mobley offensive development out of this season as it is to win 55 games and get the 2 seed. But if you think you're ready to win, if you think you can legitimately make a run this year, like, I think playoff seeding matters a ton for this team. So actually that's a really interesting rub that the Cavs have to look at. I also think if that's the case, I mean, once again, JB Bickerstaff tried this, but if you're going to try to maximize Evan's offensive output, you need to stagger him and Jared as much as you possibly can. Like, minimize the amount of time they play on the floor together, because the Boston series is a small sample size, but it was enlightening, eye-opening, whatever, how much more space he had, how much more comfortable he looked. Because there's not just one, like, it's not about Jared cramping him. It's about whoever's guarding Jared basically being able, like, whenever Mobley catches the ball, it's like Jokic against the Lakers. Like, the Lakers are guarding Jokic with Rui Hachimura in the playoffs, but Anthony Davis is standing over Rui's shoulder, ready to double team at any moment and leaving Aaron Gordon alone in the corner. Like, Jared Allen's not even in the corner. He's in the dunker spot. So whoever's guarding him is like no more than 4 to 6 feet away from Evan at any point if Evan's in the paint. It's just hard. It's just hard to operate that way.
2 things on that before we wrap up. One, to average 20 points a game, as like simple as it sounds and as difficult it actually is, it's just 4 points in a free throw every quarter, right? But to the other point, like, Kobe Altman's talked about being more proactive for the development of Evan Mobley this season, right? Because they kind of put it on the back burner, offensively at least, because they knew how great he was defensively and what he brought to the table on a nightly basis and how much that meant to the organization. That's the biggest thing, right? Now they're saying, okay, we see you. We see that we cannot get to where we want to go if your offense stays to where it has been the last couple of seasons. We saw the glimpse that everybody saw, that Jimmy pointed out multiple times on this podcast, against Boston. And what does that mean? Can we get that on a nightly basis? Can we get that all the time? Does that only come from that series? And I think, Jimmy, your question about whether they go for that 2 seed in the 55 wins or they prioritize Evan Mobley's offensive growth is difficult, because you would think, to like a common believer, they would go hand in hand, right? If Evan Mobley is the best player on the team, that's what they've been talking about, that's what they need for this team to go further. Or do you see that maybe that burns him out too much to go and get a playoff victory, whatever it may be? Because we've seen that, and we talked about that on today's podcast. So to our subtexters, I'll throw this to you, right? Like, would you rather the Cavs get the 2nd seed and finish with 55 wins? And I feel like this is an easy answer for most Cavs fans, but Or would you rather have like a good fight in the Eastern Conference semifinals again, or get past there if you have everybody healthy? Because I think it's when you
With
put
the
the Bucks.
caveat though, if you with the hard fight, okay, you lose in the second round, but you go into next offseason feeling much better about Evan Mobley's offensive future.
Yeah, because you see who they might have matched up against. And this is hypothetical, right? Because we don't know if they're going to play Boston again. We don't know who their matchup's going to be, what they're going to do in the last game of the season like they did last year, whatever. But would you take an Evan Mobley growth, a spurt, whatever you want to call it, offensively, over getting further in the conference when it comes to playoffs this year? Because we've talked about it, Jimmy, on literally our last podcast. And I said it. If they don't win an Eastern Conference or get to an Eastern Conference Finals, try to get to an NBA Final, win a championship in the next 3 years, in the window before Donovan Mitchell's player option kicks in and he has to decide if he's coming back to Cleveland for a 10th season in the NBA and trying to accrue all that money for a supermax or whatever, or going to a different team and seeing if the Cavs aren't the team to get him past the Eastern Conference, Western Conference little bump that he hasn't gotten over. Which are you going to take? And I think that's tough because right now, or before, when Evan Mobley was drafted, it was always, does this team have to have Evan Mobley as the best player to win an NBA championship, or can it be Donovan Mitchell who leads the team? And there's been a lot of difference. And there's been a lot of talk about it. We talked about it with Kobe Altman. We talked about it with Kenny Atkinson, who said that it doesn't have to be Donovan. It doesn't have to be Evan. Like, it can be either one. It has to be somebody, though. Somebody's got to lead. Somebody's got to step up. So I just think it's interesting. And, Jimmy, what do you think?
I got one more thing on Evan. Easy points. You said 4 points in a free throw per quarter. Evan Mobley averaged, I have a Kyle Lowry basketball reference paper. Evan Mobley averaged either 3.3 or 3.4 free throw attempts per game last year. That is less than a free throw attempt per quarter. Attempts. He's not making all these. These are just attempts. Kyle Lowry, who is 6 feet tall, and basically, like, over the past 3-4 years of his career, has not even really tried to attack the rim. Like, he's a pull-up three-point shooter at this point in his career. He just takes charges and takes pull-up threes. 3.9 career free throw attempts. In his heyday, he was an elite flopper. So, like, there's gotta be a way that we can get Evan Mobley to the free throw stripe a little bit more. Obviously, again, that includes making him more of a point of emphasis on offense. But, like, put your shoulder into somebody, more pump fakes, ETAL, more free throw attempts for Evan Mobley. That's an easy points per game bumper.
I pulled up Evan's stat line. He has not averaged 4 free throw attempts per game in any of his 3 seasons. The most he had was 3.8 in 2022, 2023. His average for his career is 3.7, right? So
it's like basically one-ish, one and some change shooting fouls a game. Like, you're 7 feet tall. You're at the rim. A lot of your shots come at the rim. A lot of people hitting people down there. Let's benefit from that.
Right. And I think also, like, him implementing the dribble moves that we've seen or whatever, or just creating his own shot, is going to cause defenders to be like, oh, what the heck is that? And, like, reach in and foul unintentionally, whatever. But also, like you said, I mean, I think we've all thought this to ourselves. Not only did Emoni Bates need to beef up a little bit this offseason, Evan Mobley did as well. Because if he's going to be this full-time center for the Cavs, if Jared Allen gets traded or they figure out that doesn't work, he's going to need to bang with the guys like Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo in the Eastern Conference. So that's going to be interesting to see if he bulks up or has bulked up this offseason. Media Day is less than 28 days away, less than a month away. So I think that's where we're going to wrap up. So with that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.